Sadi Cup, and welcome to the Think Pink podcast. Today, question that I get asked probably the most regularly of everything is there an age where it's too late to start? I think the short answer is no. Obviously, within reason. If you're 70 years old, you're probably not going to be able to do much, but it's more along the lines of, but even then, 70-year-olds can still train, seen plenty of them. I'd probably say knowing reality and knowing what legitimate options are for you is probably the most important part. So depending on what state your body's in, whether fighting could even be a goal. And the person asking this question was starting at the age of 29 with the goal of being a fighter. I think fighter and having a fight or having fights are two different things. A fighter makes it more a profession. It's probably the better way of putting it. I like to call people fighters once they go professional. Before that, they're just fighting and getting experience. I don't think there's many ages, say under 55 where you couldn't have fights. Once again, depending on where your body's at. So I started at 20 with already some injuries and stuff just from being an idiot. And my career was over by 30. I know people who started around the same age and they're still going at 40. I know people who started really young and they were over in their mid-20s. So there's no real recipe that's proven. So I'd probably say at 29, depending on what state your body's in, and then, just set some realistic goals. Realistic is being honest with yourself, is not making stupid choices. Start fueling your body exactly how it needs to be fueled to be able to do the sport that you're doing, because it is a hard sport on the body. I'd probably say once you've hit 30, the thoughts of, becoming a professional fighter, probably not likely, unless, maybe you smash out 5 or 6 amateurs really quickly, you're on a bit of a tear. Because at that age, you're probably going to be a lot mentally stronger than most of the young guys. So as long as you've got a chin and you've picked up the skills enough to be able to beat those guys, then you should be fine. But you're not really going to go on to have a massive fight career if you're starting in your 30s, unless you're a female. Once again, another change. It's different, different spokes for different folks. I don't know. It's different spokes for different folks. I don't know. I'm no good at these sayings, hey. But yeah, like if I know females that have started later and they don't have a problem. They can keep going and going and going and going. But it's the same with males and females as far as the body heals slower. It's just as a bloke, we're wearing heavier shots because men make more power. So there is no exact recipe for what works and what doesn't. But number one is being honest with yourself, being honest with your trainer. So that's 2. Honesty and not trying to be something that you're not. If you're, in your mid-30s, admit you're in your mid-30s. Admit that, 2 or 3 fights is what your goal is. Or, you're in your 40s and you've got a couple of injuries, like, long-term injuries that aren't going anywhere. There's no reason why you can't have a fight, just to test yourself. And then it comes down to having the right opponents. I'm not a big one for picking opponents, but unless my guys have been knocked out multiple times or they are older, I generally don't pick. The older people, when I say older, anyone over really 30 who's just starting, they generally need to have the fights picked for them a little bit more. But once again, it's not the same recipe. I've had guys at 33 jumping in for their first fights and they've just been like a young kid. So it's really hard, and, you know, discuss it with your trainer. Discuss what your trainer's opinions are on it, what they think is the best way to go about it. You know, maybe you only have 2 or 3 amateur fights just so you can have pro fights. Maybe, you know, you don't want to be killing your body later in your life, so you're probably better off just being an amateur. You know, rack up some amateur experience and maybe go to the nationals and, you know, see how you go on the national level with the amateur scene. It's such a broad range, as is age, you know, like there's plenty of kids who can't do it due to whatever, and there's plenty of adults who can't do it due to whatever. But the number one thing is be honest. Sorry about the hand movements. If you're honest and your trainer's honest with you as well, you can have a frank conversation about what would be possible. I haven't turned away a lot of people. I have said to people, I don't think it'd ever be a good thing for you, but if someone's got good skills and they're tough, and there's no reason, you know, in their 40s or whatever, or 50s, they could have a go. Why they couldn't have a go? If they're, you know, they've got no skills, but they're tough, you know, obviously you'd be really picky with who their opponent would be. If they, you know, they might be in their 20s and have no skills and be sort of, man, you're not going to put them in. It's being honest about who you are and being honest with your students. And, you know, being the student, you've got to be honest with yourself. You've got to let your trainer be honest with you and not be upset that they're being honest with you. But my general recipe where I start looking into who's getting what, up to 20, first fights are pretty much anything they're given. 20 to 30, not too dissimilar, just depending on their skill level. You know, like I'd probably turn down particular gyms that are known just for going spastic and running forward and doing stuff that isn't Muay Thai anyway. 30 to 40 is where you have to really look at what level they're at, as far as, you know, do they have good defense? Are they just tough and are they going to take a beating? You know, you've got to start really looking into this stuff, because when you know, getting in the upper 30s, if you're not tough and you can't take the shot, then you shouldn't be. And whether it be leg kicks, whether it be body kicks, whether it be headshots, you know, a good example for that is Josh, my boy Josh. I've made a deal with him. He's 37. I've made a deal with him that the day he doesn't get up, so the deal was with boxing first. The day he doesn't get up is the day I call it. So he's no longer boxing. And now he has the same option in Muay Thai. Like, he still wants to keep going, and I don't see him getting overly damaged. If he gets dropped, he gets straight back up, and it's a smile and it's get on with life, and it's usually across the neck, not across the head, that he's been getting dropped. So he's been kicked across the back of the neck a couple of times, which, being a shorter guy, he's had a couple of tall guys, they've come straight over with their leg, hit him in the back of the neck. Not doing big damage to yourself with that, but hence why he jumped straight back up from both of them and fought on straight afterwards. But at the same time, if he's getting chinned, then he's done. I'm in the same position with Rig. Rig didn't get up from his last one. Now it's, you know, he's low 30s. He's still got development stuff that he's doing, which is great. And after, you know, if he got slept again in the next, you know, in the next couple of fights, then I would probably sit down with him and we'd probably discuss what he wants to do with it. Because right now he's only like low 30s. He can still actually achieve some things in the sport, which is great. And he wants to, you know, smash out a year. But to smash out that year, you've got to be, you know, conscious after your fights. And, you know, he's tough enough and he's got the skill set. So I have the confidence, that's the difference between 33 and 37, 38. Rig recovers really quickly. Josh, he comes across as being recovered really quickly, but after his last fight out the back wasn't very nice. It was, he forgot his bag and this and that. There was a couple of little things where, okay, it's a slower recovery process now. And I think that 35 is that where the switch goes and the recovery becomes a lot slower, which is why in my own rules in my head, I kind of, when someone's over 35, I really think about it, and I think about the matchups, and I'm not giving my older guys, famously heavy hitters. I wouldn't do it to them because it's not worth it at all. But yeah, so as it's a roundabout way, there is no exact recipe, but depending on your style, who your trainer is, who your trainer's connections are, what shows you're going to be fighting on, what pathway your gym is associated with. But 29, I say go for it. At least aim to have maybe 10 fights. I don't think that's an unfair goal to have. But, maybe do what it takes to get to that level where you can jump in to have a pro fight and go, I did it. I became a fighter. Any other topics, please just write them in the comments. I read every comment that gets sent, commented on every post, and I'm happy to be doing these every week and giving out some more information. And I've got a few things saved up that I've got to do, the topics, and I'm just waiting for the heart to feel it, because I've got the list of them, and then I've got to have something hit me emotionally to make me go for that. But yeah, thanks very much, guys, for your support, and I'll see you again next week. Koppenkarp.